it's interesting when you put in a teacher's role. People believe that you are better, and that is not true. I may come from a different perspective, with more intelligence in terms of data and pieces, or a more refined thinking in terms of coming to a conclusion, but that does not make me better. Now that the world is moving a lot faster than it used to, you know, global connectivity,
Yeah.
technology, all of that has kind of fueled this speed. Um, you can become obsolete a lot faster. If I preach to evolve, I have to evolve myself, right?
Mm.
Um, uh, so the first book was more corporate, if you would. It was
Mm.
because that was the universe that I was operating in.
Hello, team, and welcome to another great conversation. We're going to be exploring the intersection of philosophy, entrepreneurship, leadership, and all through the lens of constant change. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll dive into mindset shift and what's required to thrive in a changing business landscape, and look at the importance of balancing agility with a degree of business stability, and how to harmonize the needs of customers, employees, partners, investors, and society at large. Not much of a tall order, right? So we're going to discuss the art of reprogramming how we perceive the world, the business world, and why true success as leaders lies in provoking rather than motivating. And I'm borrowing an expression from our guest. All in all, we'll be uncovering practical insights and a huge amount of timeless wisdom, I'm sure, as we navigate the constant churn of modern business through the clarity of our guest, Mr. Sid Molasse. I want to say philosopher Molasse, Professor Molasse, entrepreneur Molasse. Sid, welcome to the ET Project.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you, Wayne. And Sid is just fine.
No, but we can't let you get away. I mean, you have such an interesting background. We can't let you get away with just the Christian name. I thought we'd begin our discussion, if you game, um, with a couple of rapid fire questions, just to warm us up a little bit. They have a certain entrepreneurial flavour, just to get everyone on board. If you're okay with that, of course.
Of course.
So, aside from your own books, and you've got a couple of books, and I'll introduce those shortly, but if you were looking at a book that you would recommend, related to entrepreneurship, is there one that comes to mind?
Um, there's many, but one that I like, which is hard to read, uh, but uh, but necessary to read over and over, because as we grow, we see different things in it. Is Art of War
Art of War?
by a Chinese military guy named Master Sun Tzu.
Hmm.
It is a book that is now taught at some business schools. It's a book that's also taught at some military schools.
Yeah.
And it's about winning. And I believe, strategy was something that maybe introduced to business in the 50s. Before that, there
Right.
was no classical strategy
Hmm.
approach. And it's a term that comes from war.
Yeah.
Um, now, I don't believe, and as we talk, you're going to see that I don't believe that business is war, but I believe that there's some good learnings about listening, about discovery, and about insight, about leadership in that book. Some foundational, very basic stuff.
Very nice. I have it in my bookshelf somewhere. I'm just can't see it at the moment, but it is a great book. I'm with you on that. If you could second question, but if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would that be?
Nietzsche.
Could you introduce that person? I'm not familiar.
Yes, Nietzsche is a German philosopher. His biggest book is Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and and maybe another person would be Jung, Carl Jung,
Mm,
who introduced the idea of archetypes. Now
yeah.
I guess revealing my philosophical uh, side here, because those two I think provide some very good foundations from a thinking perspective.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
because I think whatever we see, Wayne, either as a business person or as an individual, goes through our own filter of evaluation.
right.
So understanding the filtering process, understanding our own mindset, understanding what drives us, what who we are, and it makes a huge difference in how we process information and how we make decisions based on those information, because at the end it's the decisions that drives actions and outcomes, consequences. So and that's why I say we're not them, we're not others.
Right.
So we have to understand, be mindful first, and understand that. Otherwise, you can read 10,000 leadership books and none of them would work.
Mm, yeah. Very true. Very true. And if I remember correctly, Jung's archetypes are the basis of the Myers-Briggs. Um,
I've heard that. I don't know that. So discount my comments on that front.
it's not critical, but so if you could wind the clock back and go back to your 16-year-old self, a piece of advice that you would offer?
Yes. Uh, I would say listen more. Um, I have learned, and my wife says, why do you have, why do you go back to this? People get offended when I say it, but it's okay because I think it's true. Most people listen to reply.
Yes.
They don't listen to learn. They listen to reply. And what happens is, if you listen, obviously you learn more. And when you learn more, this is a very selfish thing. This is not one of these, um, new age kind of stuff. The more I listen, the more I learn. The more I
Mm,
learn, the better my decisions. The better my decisions is to my advantage.
yeah.
So it's a very selfish thing to do.
I can't wait to start talking about philosophy because I can sense there's so much philosophical thought process that goes on with your.
I'm happy you didn't say so much bullshit in your head.
I was being polite, Sid. Come on. Final question. Most influential figures during those formative years. Anyone stand out for you as you look back over your career?
Yes, yes. And I haven't, I mean, most people don't ask me, so I haven't mentioned him in a lot of places. And I hope, I don't even know where he is. He must be in his 80s, I think. Uh, uh, when I sold my first company, I was in college.
Mm,
I then started a job at a company called SGS. The first S stood for the main founder, who was the president, a fellow named Jim Steinman. Jim was an interesting character, but uh, he provided me with the opportunity to, at the age of maybe 24, I would 25. He would take me to board of directors meetings at Union Bank, or he was helicopter, and have me express things, and he taught me that my opinion matters.
Mm.
Uh, but uh, at the same time, he did something that probably if anyone does to an employee today, they'll be fired. But I appreciate the hell out of him. When I was at the job for maybe 6 months, 8 months, and I believe the client was Motorola at that time, and I was doing a project for Motorola. And in those days, we would write reports, and it wasn't there wasn't any word processors or anything, and then we would write it, and then somebody would type it, and if there was a error when you edit it, they'll cut it and paste it on a piece of paper. It was a complicated
Yep.
process. And when I did my first report, uh, and Jim read every report that would go to the client before it goes to the client. So one night at about 8, 9 o'clock at night, I was going home from the office, and Jim's office was glassed in, and he could see anybody goes in and out. And he did this and says, "Come on in." So I went in. He took that report, threw it at me, and he says, "You can't write piece of your. You will never make it as a consultant." And this report was filled with red marks.
Mm.
Um, said, "You can't write." And he said, "You're a brilliant analyst. You're a great thinker, but you can't write." And as you know, now I have probably 100, 200 articles. I've written a couple of books, and no, nobody else wrote it for me. I did it. But that motivated me to see and know what the problem I had. And he was right. I couldn't write worth of dime. Again, you can't do that today to anybody, but in those days it was perfectly fine, and I didn't take it as a, you know, as anything but constructive. So yes, he had tremendous amount of impact on my life. I don't even know if he knows it or not.
That's an interesting story when I pieced together the other things going on in your life around that period of time. Um, the fact that you weren't able to write very well um, might be an interesting sideline here because if we think then to what you were also doing around that time, and timeline, you can correct me, but I believe you were also teaching comparative East and Western philosophy around this time.
Yes, I was. That's true. That is true. That is true. So um, um I I got into an organization with some fellow that was introduced me to this organization, and it was a kind of a Socrates. I don't know if you are familiar with that setup of discussion and learning. And very quickly, I got very, very interested in it because uh, it was challenging all sides of my mind, if you would.
Mm.
Uh, Now, most of the people were a lot older than me because philosophy is not something that appeals to a young kid.
This
And
was
I
something
wasn't sure if it
challenging.
was, yeah, and I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if it was philosophy I was interested in, uh, or it was just I was soaking this knowledge that was different than my training because I was an
Mm.
engineer. I was, and then I began to kind of when we talked about I don't know the origin of universe. Okay, so this guy says this, Rumi says that, that guy says that, Plato says that, and then it was the scientific side, which was okay. Let's go look at the 3 minutes, first 3 minutes of the world and the Big Bang, and kind of connecting all of those things together.
Right.
Got me very, very interested. And then I began to see, hey, from a religious perspective, what is it in the Genesis, and how does that relate to what's in Islam, or what's in the Indian front of of things, or or the
Hinduism.
Eastern philosophy.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, Wayne, you will find tremendous if you are without bias. If you're not looking at the world from a filter of my childhood or this that,
Yes.
the amount of similarity that you will find is astonishing.
That's what I was fascinated by, Sid. Like, did you favor, like you speak about Socrates, so therefore more Western philosophy, but did you favor Western philosophy over
I
Eastern?
favored, I see, I was born in Iran,
Right.
and came to the United States when I was 15, 16 years old. So I favored the Eastern philosophy.
Okay.
Eastern, particularly, there are poets like Hafez and Rumi,
Mm,
and then you have people like Kant and Hegel that are quoting those guys. So there was those connections there, uh, and then you have the Zoroastrian background and all of that.
mm,
Uh, but then as I began to look at Plato's of the world and others, I could see the connection.
right.
And that connection actually got me more interested because it wasn't just a poem. It wasn't just one man's perspective. It was a bigger connective fabric that made sense to me. And I would actually encourage people to look at it from that perspective because
Right.
I think a one dimensional anything lacks the depth and the width that it desires.
Mm. That's interesting. I mean, if we think about the two different sides of the equation, the metaphysical level paints them quite opposites. Um, so one is more about the interconnectedness, the interdependentness, letting go of the ego type thing, while the other one is more dualism, you know, having separate entities, individualism. Is bringing it together is quite a task, I could imagine.
It's very easy, actually.
Okay.
If you're not filtered by conventions, it's very easy. If you're filtered, if you would, by conventions defined by others, by the
Mm,
society or by the religion or by
right.
whoever taught you those things, then it becomes very hard because we're working within frameworks that are solid. And it's the same thing now that I've practiced all my life in terms of there is a fluidity in life
Mm,
that carries our boat, if you would. And if we are fixated within certain dogma, whatever that is, it doesn't matter what it is. It's
mm,
any one of them. I call a box. Is like what we call in our life. If I now connect that to our daily life, is what we call our comfort zone.
right.
That's where we operate,
Yeah.
and I believe our comfort zone is really our death zone.
Mm,
It's where we go to die because
yeah.
because there's no progress. It's where all the doors are closed and there's no movement. There's
Mm.
nothing new. It's comfortable, but so is being on morphine is comfortable.
It's essentially living in our subconscious and letting the habit process day on day, run our life, right? And I
Yeah.
guess that's what we'll come to later when we start to talk about the new venture you're moving into with your academy. But at the age of 25, teaching philosophy, how were you received? Not only by the faculty, I guess, around you, but how were you received by the students?
I don't know. We have to ask them. Nobody quit, so I would assume. One memory I have is in those days I would pick a Rumi poem and we'll begin with that and then say,
Mm,
okay, now how do you see that and how does it link to, and we'll see where it goes. It's either to the conversations about the Plato's seed or change or the meaning of truth or whatever some.
Yeah.
And there was one woman, a young lady, who came to me and says, "You know, the first time you asked me this, I couldn't sleep for 3 nights. I was so afraid what you would ask me next." I don't know what I would ask you. I just randomly picked this thing. There's no magic to it, but it's interesting when you put in a teacher's role. People believe that you are better, and that is not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is not true at all. I may come from a different perspective, with more intelligence in terms of data and pieces, or a more refined thinking in terms of coming to a conclusion, but that does not make me better.
Mm,
Um, it's not a race of who gets there faster.
right. Yeah. Talking about reading, are you an avid reader?
I do read quite a bit, yes.
Yeah.
I do
What
read
type?
quite a bit. I read, and this may sound silly, I read probably 2 or 3 hours a day on everything that you can possibly imagine. From I don't know, yesterday I was reading something about feng shui,
Mm,
uh, because um, I was doing one of the videos for the academy, which has to do with
okay.
the clutter mind. And I thought, huh, you know, we use feng shui ideas to clear home and say energy transfers. I wonder how that applies to our mind. I'm interested in it. Or this morning, I was reading something about the economic effects of a tariff.
Hang on, you can't leave us hanging now. Did you reach a conclusion about?
Not yet. No, no, not yet.
Okay, very good, very good. You mentioned you do a lot of writing today. You've got a couple of books out. I think the first one was The Caterpillar's Edge,
Correct.
Embracing Change. What about 2017? Could you introduce the book just very briefly?
Sure. The book came out of, see, I had worked with entrepreneurs, I'd worked with CEOs of very large organizations, Fortune 100. I've worked with private equity in terms of buying and selling companies and so forth. And I saw one common thread, which was this idea about change being bad. We have in every organization, we have this thing called change management.
Hmm,
Why the hell do we need to manage change? It's like it's the enemy. So that kind of intrigued me. And as I was talking to people, I noticed that a lot of companies are addicted to sameness. And if you go back even in the S&P 500 and look at that and look at all the different companies, you see that only 15% of those who were really great in 60 years ago are now on part of S&P 500. They don't exist anymore. What happened to these people? They had great companies, they had great leaders, they had great ideas. And when you look deeper, it's just addiction to sameness,
hmm,
and not evolving, not evolving. Uh, Now that the world is moving a lot faster than it used to, you know, global connectivity,
yeah.
technology, all of that has kind of fueled this speed. Um, you can become obsolete a lot faster,
Hmm,
uh, and uh, and the most of the problem begins in our mind. And in our addiction to this sameness, we think this is good, so why change it? I mean, we have phrases like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I would say, if it ain't broke, why isn't it? Uh, because if
I,
I'm doing
I,
something for 10 years or 5 years, and there's a trillion ways of doing it better, if I'm still doing it the same way, I'm a fool.
hmm,
Uh, so the idea came from there, and then obviously it talks a lot about using data and analytics, which is one of my passions. It talks about this notion of really three pillars. One is aligning with uncertainty, that nothing in the world is certain. Risk
Yeah.
is woven into everything. So if we wait for certainty, we would never get there.
Mhm.
We can never make a decision. The second is appreciating our reality, and that is, I'm not against big goals or things, but uh, and this is where the name comes from, is notion of caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It takes lots of stages
Mhm.
um, before it becomes a butterfly. You know, somewhere around 7,000 muscles are moved and changed, and before this this thing becoming something entirely different, a different
Yeah.
species that can fly. And this requires us appreciating our reality that, hey, life is not like a switch. You can't
Mhm.
throw it and boom, you're there. It's how do you get there? And that means incremental things. That means understanding and appreciating the reality of life. Whether you're running a big company or you're just starting up or you're a student or whatever. And the third is this notion of constantly looking for more,
Mhm.
and I call it more ahas. You know, you say aha. That's when the solution to a problem becomes clear to you. You know, when you say, I got it. Uh-huh. So we have to constantly look for no more ahas, more insights, more, oh, this doesn't work. Oh, this is better. And if you're constantly doing that, and it's not an annual event in a big company, uh, we can adjust our course, and that got to the book's core element of getting to a dynamic strategy, which is
Right.
erasing the line between execution and strategy and dynamically doing that. As a matter of fact, I know uh, you have a lot of audience in India.
Mhm.
Uh, the book was actually introduced to a fellow uh, Ravi. We'll skip his last name, who is the chairman of the board of, I think, 6 or 7 rather large organizations in India, very, very big organizations.
Right.
And a friend of mine, Steve, who was with Cisco at the time and was on their board, met him in India and gave him my book. And he apparently, and this is a story that he told me, he wrote me an email saying this, uh, read the book on his way back to India from London. The meeting was in London,
Mhm.
and he made copies of it in in those parts of the world we hate buying things. So he made copies of the book, and distributed it to his management team of one of his companies. And apparently they initiated this thing, the Caterpillar project, and after 1 quarter, they became profitable. After, I believe, 5 quarters that they were hugely in negative. And then he applied it to all of his other companies. He even changed some of the logos to a butterfly or Uh, the point is that it's about mindset. I don't ever provide do A, B, C, and D because I don't think we're all. I don't think life is like going to IKEA and buying a bookcase.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're very different than I am. Your employees are different. Your family is different. Your
Yes.
everything about you is different. We have so you mentioned about practical advice, and I'll say practical is what's practical to you. Practical to me, maybe running 5 miles a day. Practical to you is not running 5 miles a day. You have a
Mhm.
bad leg. So
Right.
it may be a practical advice because I think it's practical, but you know. Uh,
Is that when I
so
saw you write
that's
the
the
book?
first book. It's about change and evolving all the time. I actually have some folks reached out to me recently because the whole AI thing is now, in the past year is all this book was written in 2017, as you mentioned. It was a bestseller. The last chapter is called "The 2 Minute Warning,"
Mm.
and I say, let me pontificate about the future. There will be AI. It will do this. The jobs are going to be gone, but it's the time for creativity and innovation. And if you're not evolving, then you're going to be blah 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 and all that sort of stuff. So some people reach out to me and say, "How the hell did you know that?" I said, "Well, I did. I wasn't. I was just looking at the dots. I wasn't. I'm no futurist that's sitting in a room imagining things."
Yeah.
But I think we're at an amazing time now that after a few years than I even thought we were back then.
There's so many tangents we can go down based on the book itself. Just to continue on the journey though, from the book, and now I can see where a lot of the ideas stem from with the TED Talk.
Yes,
The artist or the entrepreneur. You talk about sameness is crazy, never leave change to chance. Um, there's a progression. What is what I'm seeing in your thinking
of
and in your
course,
writing. Yeah,
of course, of course.
yeah,
If I preach to evolve, I have to evolve myself, right?
mm,
Um, uh, so the first book was more corporate, if you would. It was
mm,
because that was the universe that I was operating in. Um, and but the second book, and there was a couple of TED Talks. One was in, I believe, 2010, 11,
right.
where I talked about, hey, this notion of we're flipping the corporates defining how things work from where the society is defining through social media and all of that, and uh, which came true actually. Back then, there was no Twitter, and all
Mm,
that has changed. And the second one was the one that you mentioned, which led to actually, I don't know if the second TED Talk was before or after or during the same time that I did the second book, which is called
yeah.
"You Are Not Them." And "You Are Not Them" uh, was a bestseller both in philosophy and business. um, which is you will see my philosophical side in there a lot more. There's even poems that I've written in there, um, that that are uh, that are all focused about our mindset,
Mm,
and I introduce a different definition of entrepreneurship, which is actually the original definition of entrepreneurship, which is different than what most people believe. And that has now led into some other things. You mentioned my beliefs about the view of customers and interactions in business and the five pillars, which is
yeah.
some of my new writings, which we can talk about. But basically, Wayne, I believe that we're all entrepreneurs.
Your
I
definition of an entrepreneur is quite interesting. You you
it's
you break it in half and you look at the entre and the
There's two ways to look at it. There's one way that you break it into entrepreneur,
yeah.
and it literally means grabbing knowledge. Grabbing knowledge means entrepreneur.
Mm,
There's another definition that a guy in 1700s, for the first time, introduced the word entrepreneur. It was altered about 50 years later, with one minor thing.
mm,
Uh, and that definition is entrepreneur is someone who has something. Notice the something is not defined. Who wants to exchange it with something of higher value, knowing that there is risk.
mm,
So I have something. I want to exchange it with something better, but I know it may not be necessarily 100%. Uh, let's give an example. You take any student that goes to college. They spend money on the college. If it's not free in some countries, in US we pay a lot of money. Uh, there's late nights and lots of hard work and homeworks and this and that in this hope. And we give our time and we give our life, 4 years of our life or whatever it might be, to get a degree in the hopes that that degree will make our life better. So we're exchanging our time and money
Mm.
to get to a degree, knowing that, hey, because I have a degree, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be happy or super wealthy or super successful or any of that.
Yeah.
But we do that. So we are an entrepreneur because that gene to thrive is actually in our is in all of us. It was built 500,000 years ago. Uh, so, uh, so I believe that we are an entrepreneur, and the book kind of goes through this, proving this point that we are an entrepreneur. Now, the
Right.
question though is, what do we do with this talent?
Mm.
It's not the talent of entrepreneurship; it's the spirit of entrepreneurship that gets us from place to place, right? It's we can all see, but what we see is different.
Right.
Right? We can all hear, but how we hear and how we filter it is different. We're all entrepreneurs. That spirit of using that entrepreneurship is has something to do with our mindset. And it has to do with what we have and what we want to exchange it with because we think it's higher value. So was Mother Teresa an entrepreneur? You bet. She went around, she raised money, she did all this work, went to India, went all over the world to deal with poverty.
Mm.
She defined that as higher value for her. And there
Yeah.
was a risk. She knew that. She wouldn't be able to solve it. Was Martin Luther King an entrepreneur? Yes, you bet he was. Is Elon Musk an entrepreneur? Of course he is. But entrepreneurship is not about money. It's about an exchange of what you have for something better based on your definition, reasons, and how you define satisfaction.
So pretty much, in other words, we're all entrepreneurs, whether we acknowledge it or not.
Most of
Yeah.
us don't.
Mm.
Part of it is because the definition has been kind of
Yeah.
corrupted in a way. Oh, that guy's an entrepreneur, and everybody thinks, oh, that's a fast talker, bullshitter. That's not the case. That guy's an entrepreneur, therefore, all he thinks about is money, and it's about money. No, it's not.
And that was something I was going to lead into, but the term has been heavily linked to business. You're talking, very very generically with the term, but the term is heavily linked to business, and not only business but to capitalism. Would be my take. Uh,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Not only capitalism, but everything that we do in life. Let's take again. I'm using Indian examples today more than let's say all those who believe in the Jain faith.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're familiar with it. For some of the audience that may not be, the belief is that we can't eat anything that everything, even the dust, has some life. Well, they're exchanging the pain of going through that because they believe that not doing that is of higher value.
Yeah.
They may not think they're in a village, they're working somewhere, but they are an entrepreneur because they are taking a risk and they believe that this is better than that. And that's perfectly fine.
Mm.
That's perfectly fine. As long as we understand the talent. Now, how we apply it gets into our mindset. If we want to apply it to a business, if you are a CEO, let's first figure that out that you're an entrepreneur, not because you're after money, because you're exchanging this thing. Then we'll go to something that we're going to talk about a lot at the academy, which is not only are you entrepreneur, everybody you deal with is entrepreneur. Your customers are entrepreneurs. Your employees are entrepreneurs. Your partners are entrepreneurs. The people in your community are entrepreneurs. The investors are entrepreneurs. And you know what they're trying to do? To exchange what they have with something better. And they are in complete control of defining what is better,
mm, mm,
right? It's their reason. So we say, I have a sales team. My sales team made $2.1 million this year. Your sales team had zero decision making power in making $2.1 million. Zero. Who made that decision? The buyer did. Based on what? Their own reason.
mm,
Reasons that would do what? Help them exchange their dollar with something better. Who decides what's better? They decide what's better. So let's change the mindset. Let's figure out not how my sales team is doing. Let's figure out what the reasonings are of the people who make a decision to buy from us, the decision of the employees who want to bring me productivity, or the partners who would want to work with me, or for those early stage startup people, for those who want to invest in my company.
mm.
What drives them? Why do they? And it's not all about money. It's not about money. Employees work for a company. Yes, they need to pay the rent, obviously, but some want options. Some want the curiosity and the creativity. Some like the bus. Some like the distance that they travel every day. Some for there's 1,000 reasons that people go in there, and at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the evening, they make a decision.
Yeah.
Do I bring productivity and new thought and creativity, or do I push the button?
Yeah. Sid, the five pillars that we're sort of bouncing around now, if I'm the leader and I'm looking at these five pillars and I'm looking at it from your perspective, it sounds almost like the utopian dream. I mean, how can a leader pull these strings to keep what is often seen as opposing demands or conflicting demands between those five pillars? How can we balance all of these five at once
So
to
let
have this?
let's you're absolutely correct. It is a challenge.
Yeah,
So because they're conflicting. I can give my employees a little more money, 2 days off, but then I have to increase the price for my customer, or impact the delivery time, or I can give my partners less money and they will give me quality of work that's no good, and it would impact my customer. Or they're all created. I can
yeah,
reduce the price of my customers so that they're happier, and then my investors wouldn't be happy, right?
yeah.
So there's a few things that you have to consider here, and I'll get to the discussion of the leader's role. But first of all, these reasons are not static; they're dynamic, meaning the employees of today are very different than employees of 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The easiest thing is work from home. That's the most obvious. The young, the generation, the expectations, they're all different. Uh, a woman today is different than a woman 10, 15 years ago. So to say my target market are women between the ages of 18, 24, the 18, 24 is not the same, and the woman is not the same. Their expectation, their reasons for engaging with you is very different. Okay? So the reasonings for an investor, a 3% return of the market was perfectly fine 5 years ago. 12% is risky today. Okay, so these reasons that people engage with us is always changing. So it's not like I am solving a multivariable formula and I'm optimizing it based on constant. See, this is the engineering part of me that's coming out now. We're not optimizing based on constant variables and constant constraints.
Mm,
So that even makes what you asked even more complicated.
yeah.
Okay. Uh, and companies push on different fronts, which would make the body of the organization kind of lump-sided at a time. And we see this, for example. Uh, General Motors and Ford and the Chrysler folks uh, tried to focus on electric vehicles. And they paid their investors pretty niftily because they made like $20 billion a quarter or some huge number.
Mm.
But then they ignored the employee. As they ignored the employee, then it was the union issues, and they went on a strike. And in a span of 2 weeks, there was $9.5 billion of economic impact because they went on strike. And then they had to scratch a lot of the profits they were giving to investors, and they had to put all of their EV dreams, modify it somehow, and because people were saying, "Hey, you're eliminating jobs," and yeah, right. So what they did is, on one front, for a period of time, they had quote unquote success,
Mm.
but because they ignored the other part, this became lopsided. So if you're trying to become a Olympic player, and I assume that every business, every company we make, we like it to be the best, right? We don't want to have a half optimized company. We want it to have the best product, the best investors, the best return, the best everything, right? If that's what we want to achieve, like an Olympian who wants to win the Olympics, that Olympian must work on their mind, they must work on their nutrition, they must work on their upper body or lower body. It's the whole body that makes them an Olympian.
Mm.
It's not that just they're strong up here, they're going to be able to win. They won't because it's just not possible. An organization is the same. You have multiple pieces to an organization, and if each one of these begins to be less optimum, less than less than best, then you're not the best. So the key is, but we do this all the time. I gave you an example. I give you
Mm.
another example uh, when Toyota tried to in long time ago, they had this big recall about the brakes or something. They lost $57 billion. Now, they did that because they tried not to originally create a big deal, not have a lot of recalls, but then people died and it became a big deal and they lost. It's because they wanted to maintain their margins,
Mhm.
right? That they tainted who Toyota was, the brand, the safety, all of that, and they lost a lot of money for it,
Yeah.
right? So this is normal that people begin to go in one way or another way. Now, going back to your leader's position, there is no balance. Never. There's no balance. Balance is an illusion.
Mhm.
Uh, when people say, I like to have work-life balance, it's like we're two parts. And if they put us on a scale, this is 72 pounds, okay, for 36 and a half here and 36 and a half here, and okay, this is work-life balance. But that's not us. If as an employer, I think at 10 o'clock in the morning, if you're not thinking about your sick kid, I'm a fool. You're not human.
Yeah.
And if at 10 o'clock at night you're sitting there and all of a sudden you have an idea about the work and improving your family's uh, livelihood and you don't think about it, you're a fool. So we're blended. So it's not work-life balance and it's not leadership balance.
Mhm.
It's about harmony.
Okay.
And harmony is different in balance.
Mm. Yeah.
So if you listen to music, balance would be let's play 10 minutes of guitar, 10 minutes of drums, 10 minutes of piano, right? And then the guy comes in and sings for 10 minutes. Harmony is you can't tell. That's harmony,
Mm.
right? And that's what makes the music. So a company is the same thing. Look at it as a living entity, look at it as a symphony. The role of a leader in this context is a conductor
Right.
who who sees that, hey, the reasonings are changing here. So how do I work all the sides to satisfy these? Okay,
Mm.
and this is interesting about people. This is interesting about people. Uh, you may live in, let's say, Singapore.
Hmm.
You may have a BMW as a car. You may make, I don't know, $10,000 a month or $20,000 a month. You have certain things. You have a kid, you have this, you have that. Okay. Uh, you may think, hey, I would be satisfied if, as opposed to the BMW, I would have a Mercedes. The difference is $10,000, $100,000. And then you think, but I like my kid to have to go and do horseback riding. So you do an exchange, right? You, you compromise in certain things and say, hey, I'm still it's not you didn't you're not dissatisfied now because you did this. You just made a choice of how you would be satisfied by allocating things properly.
Mm.
Does that make sense? So my customer, my employee, if they're educated, if they're of the same reasoning, consistent, coherent, we can manage a suboptimal. It's not optimal.
Right.
It's a satisfaction level that is at a level that I'm meeting the reasons. But guess what? If I meet all of your reasons, Mr. or Mrs. Employee, and then I lose all of my customers, then you don't have a job. That's a significant dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
So the ability to manage this and conduct this is the leader's role. Is
Mm.
it hard? Well, you want it to be a leader, and it's not just about playing golf.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, we all lead our life the same way. We're all leaders.
Mm.
We, I mean, I'm not saying we're all great leaders. We're not visionary, but we have a vision for our life.
Hmm.
We manage our kids. We manage our life. Some of us may be poor leaders. We don't know what to do with our money, and we manage it poorly and whatever. But some of us may be a little better. But we lead.
You mentioned a little bit earlier about this flux that we live in and how technology is really increasing the rate of change all around us. If you put on your multiple caps, right, consultant, advisor, investor, professor, philosopher, whatever role you're playing, how do you see that future, be it short, medium term?
So let me put the philosopher hat on first, and then we'll drill it down uh, on 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 real life parameters. There was 40 years ago, 40,000 years ago, I'm sorry, 40,000 years ago, uh, an era began. It's called the explosion era.
Right.
Explosion era began when people, human beings, began to understand math, they the additions and subtractions, and they also began to clothe themselves, some basic stuff.
Hmm.
And then that era after it began, obviously we see all the stuff that happened. Agriculture came, and this came, and that came, and then they began to look at microscopes to look at within to telescopes to look at without, then printing, then all of that sort of stuff that has happened. Up to this point, the evolutions have been from a mostly physical perspective. That is, you and I were shorter, taller. We had different looks and face. We created the knife, and therefore our teeth began to not be as long. We had babies in certain ways. We stood on our 2 feet. All of that stuff has been basically physical. Now, something external has come. Call it a new fire. And we call this AI, that
Yeah.
allows us to have the processing power of 10,000, 100,000 people next attached to our head simultaneously. So I'm not just a unit of one. I can
Mm.
access any book ever written. I can think of any calculation anyway that could have taken years and it would be done in seconds.
Yeah.
So I have now been given a processing power unlike I have ever had in the past 500,000 years. Okay? So I believe that we are, and again, when I'm saying we are, this is not this afternoon. These are, when we talk about 40,000 years, give or take 100,000 years, you know.
Yeah.
I think we're at the cusp of a new explosion era. I call it explosion era 2.0, where our evolution is going to shift from physical to mental.
Hmm.
That is, we're going to be moving as humans, and I believe in I have faith in humanity that we can make this transition, but we're going to have some casualties in between, and we can talk about that. That we would be able to focus more on innovation and creativity than the mundane tasks that we do now. Somehow we think driving is good. Well, driving is a waste of time.
Mm.
Well, I could have done something else. Yeah, I may drive because I have fun, but staying on some freeway 2 hours a day to get to a work where I just punch things and put numbers in a spreadsheet is not, yeah, I'm getting paid for it and I respect that. But if that can be done,
Mm.
yeah, I don't have a job, but it's a stupid thing to do. It's a mechanical thing to do. It's
Yeah.
taxing my intelligence on something very repetitive that that I can do a lot more. Right? So I believe that from a philosophical perspective, we are at the verge of a new explosion era, and this is an evolution of our mind. Now, as Lyndon Johnson would put it, there's a painful meanwhile that we have to endure. This is people being afraid of AI replacing their jobs.
Mm.
Would it? Yes, it would.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
It's a fact. Why? Because economically, there is $15 trillion of economic benefit every year. The economic impact, as calculated, I have the numbers from 3, 4 years ago. I can't keep up with the new numbers. A few years ago, it was $33 trillion, trillion with a T. That is twice the size of GDP of China. That
Mm.
is 1.4 billion people create a GDP of about $17 trillion. And AI by itself, through productivity, RPA, and all that sort of stuff, is generating $33 trillion of economic impact. You can't ignore this tsunami. This is coming.
Yeah.
So it's massive. It's going to have a lot of change. It's going to take people. And this is another thing that I would say we need to get to understand that change is not our enemy. And you mentioned the TED Talk, and if folks are interested, they can go look at it. It's about, I think, 13, 14 minutes, and
Mm.
it's called "Are You the artist or the entrepreneur?" And I begin the TED Talk with this notion that imagine everything was the same. Imagine you had a 5-year-old and you still have the 5-year-old. Yes, you are the best scientist. You're the Einstein of your time, or the best. You're the best singer, the best whatever you think. You have the best wife, the best situation, the best. But then imagine that nothing changes.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Change is the only friend we have that gives us options. The only friend that gives us options to choose from is change. And without those options, there is no prosperity. We're done. Now, is there something bad about change? Yeah, yeah, yeah. There is. There is a devil change. There is a devil in change. That is when we get so excited about change that we forgot execution and results. That
Mm,
we just change. I've seen this in a lot of CEOs that that I sit on the board of and whatever. They're so enamored with, oh, this thing is better than this and this. And you said change is good, but change that impedes progress is not good,
mm.
right? So change is not our enemy. It shouldn't be managed. It should be embraced. Maybe it should be made, but
It's in some ways a nice segue to talking about the new venture that you've just embarked on. Probably not just embarked on, but just released the Anabasis Academy. Could you share a little bit about what you're
of
doing there
course,
and what that's all
of
about?
course. So by now, I guess you have a little bit of a sense of your audience, your listeners would have a little bit of a sense of who I am and how I think. Um, so over the past many few years, I've helped a lot of entrepreneurs. I've helped a lot of students, and I've had a lot of people come to me and say, "Hey, Sid, I did what you said, and I'm doing this now." And some of them have been pushing me, saying, "Hey, what you say and the way you say it, and all of that, this philosophy of seeing the world in this way, should be shared." And I kind of pushed back because I'm horrible at marketing myself, to be honest with you, Wade. But I was talking to somebody in Philippines, and this young lady uh, said, "Sid," and I had no idea that who she was, but she said, "I've read all your." Somebody out of the blues in Philippines. It says, "I've read all your books. I've read your. I see your TED talks. I see your writings, and you should be doing that. How can I help you do that?" And that triggered essentially a few months ago the idea of the Anabasis Academy. Basically, the core of it is this. There is a lot of nonsense out there in the social media world, and people selling nonsensical motivational things that makes no sense. That is, uh, go, 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 get, higher things, fear not, all of that stuff that that if we're all different, we can't. They're not practical for us. They're just stuff. I may get excited. Oh, somebody else did this. Good for them. But I live in the projects, or I have an IQ of this, or my father isn't his father, or I'm not 7 foot tall to go to MBA. All of those stuff isn't me. So it doesn't make any sense. So there's
Mm,
so much stuff out there around this nonsensical motivational things, and there's so much stuff out there about do one, two, three how to's and you're going to become a trillionaire, which is not the case. That, or entrepreneurship things that works on mechanical things. What do I mean by mechanical things? If I give you, Wayne, I'll give you uh, the best meat, the best spices, the most wonderful pots, the best oven. I'll give you a great kitchen, opened outside, wonderful, airy, great. That does not, none of those makes you None of them makes you a chef.
mm,
So you have all these books about leadership, about accounting, about marketing, about but they're all mechanical things. Are they important? Yeah, I like to know how the people react to. Yeah, they're important. Accounting has to be done right, so it's important. But they're not what makes you you. They're not what makes you. Those motivational things are not making you you. These one, two, three how to's don't make you you. They don't make you the entrepreneur that you deserve to be. They don't define what you want. They don't define what you is better. They don't define the level of risk. They don't. You do that, and they are not practical for you. So the way that we can use these entrepreneurial talent that we all have, which we talked about, and turn it into an entrepreneurial spirit begins in our mindset and begins with an understanding of reasons, satisfactions, and understanding the factors that impacts us from fear to nervousness to courage to leadership to all of this stuff. The way we define it is who can become. And all of that is creating our own philosophy. Now, if we do that as an entrepreneur, not necessarily building a business, but maybe we become the next Mother Teresa. Maybe we are the best entrepreneur at home, where we earn money from whatever we work. We take our children to Disneyland, and we're managing this smoothly. Everybody is satisfied. That maybe we do that. When we do that, we are creating a better version of ourselves, like a caterpillar. A better version. It's not the final version. It never
Mm.
is the final version, but it's a better version. And the crazy idea that I have is if you do that, and I do that, and everybody else does that, we are going to be in a much better world than we are now. If each one of us just seeks to create our next best version and not be trapped in this thing that they call the comfort zone, or not be fooled with, hey, let's think outside of the box. What box? Who drew that box? The society? Your imagination? Let's break that box. What? You have a lot more capabilities. And it's not me. No. So this means that I would have to provoke you and not necessarily motivate you. I have to provoke you enough so that you are now in charge. Okay? I have to provoke you, not motivate you, to see your entrepreneurial talent and to believe that there is a next best version in you, that you are the art and you are the artist. And yes, you are the entrepreneur.
Mm.
So the mission of Anabasis Academy is around this provoking business. So to accomplish that, it's very different than your academic educational stuff. There are no tests, there are no PowerPoints, none of that. There are a series of what I call conversational uh, collections, conversational collections, 5 to 7, 10 minute videos, each one maybe 10 of them, 8 of them, that you can watch on your phone, uh, that have a particular purpose to it. For example, one may be around this idea of satisfaction, right? So, and that gets into the customer stuff, and then we can expand it. So we first have to layer this in different areas. Then there is another one that may be about this cluttering business, your mind being cluttered. There's one around leadership, one around making your next best version, one around this kind of ideas, right? And we talk about fear, we talk about all sorts of things. It's so there's a series of collections. There is also the ability for you as a member to create your own master class around the topics, not of how do I do QuickBooks, not how do I, about dealing with fear, about the topic of courage, about what I have felt, what I've done, how I have evolved, and those would also become content and educational things for others. We would have a series that we call those elevate circles. Those are circles of a few people that get together, and then we use that as a means of progress. We have another expert circle where we would bring in the likes of I don't know, one of the people that would come uh, is uh, uh, is Marty Cooper, the inventor of cell phone. I mean, you can imagine what goes on, but we're not talking about, hey, tell me about your history.
Mm.
And it's not a podcast. It's tell me when you feared along the way, and how do you deal with it, and what happened, and those kind of things that have to do with the mindset. Essentially, we're just exploring it. I'm just provoking to look at life, look at things from multiple angles, because if you change your frame of reference,
Yeah.
you're going to decide what fits you better. I'm no judge. right? And then we have this every 2 weeks we have what we call a wake-up call, and it's about a 20-minute call talk, and then we have someone that we call that we put on what we call a hot seat. They'll talk about their business for about three minutes,
Mm.
and we would then live in a rapid fire kind of, you mentioned rapid fire earlier, in the rapid fire kind of a mode, say, okay, how about this, how about that, how about that, did you think about this, this is it, this is right. And that becomes by itself something that others can watch, others can, so the idea is interactive learning, not an academic learning. The idea is, in an academic learning, it's like you have a vase and you pour water in it, information in it, for it to fill up. In this model, I want to ignite a fire in your in your mind. The rest of it you can do.
So, in essence, you're looking to provoke, to um, enable the motivation to be an inner motivation to make the change.
There's
Uh,
nobody can motivate you better than you, but you
yeah.
have to find your reasons of why. Your reasons are very different than Elon Musk's.
Mm.
Okay, you may think they're the same, but they're very different. If you find your reasons and you appreciate your reality and you begin to deal with the risk and you begin to deal with all those other elements that drive you from here to there, you can accomplish it, but just based on you, not based on what I say.
Yeah.
Now, people ask me, what is this member that you're talking about? There's three levels of member. The first one is intrigued. Uh, and this may sound silly because it goes against any financial sense possible. It is $1 forever. Okay? $1 forever. And the reason for $1 is, if you don't think that this is worth $1, this is not your place. Don't come. It's okay. If you're intrigued enough to pay less than a cup of coffee for a day, actually one-fifth of a cup of coffee if you go
One
to
fifth
Starbucks,
in today's
then come
market. Yeah.
on board. That gives you access to certain things and gives you discounts in certain things and so forth. Then you have the committed that says, I'm committed. That now is $27 a month. But the first 1,000 people are already sponsored. Other people, those people that I mentioned, they like me and they said this. I said, okay, you like me, you help others. And I'll match it. I'll match it. So whatever they put in, I'll match it. So we have actually more than 1,000 now, but we're gonna do 1,000. The first 1,000 people, the first 3 months, they're sponsored. Somebody else, they don't have to pay anything except that dollar that says I'm intrigued.
Mhm.
So they'll be sponsored, and then there's another level that is more expensive that has other things to it and so forth. But basically, that's the idea. The idea is to get to touch as many people as we can, and to provoke people to create their next best version.
It sounds fascinating, Sid, and unfortunately we're way over time, so I'm going to have to wrap it up. But uh,
I thought you were going to say, and what are you smoking?
no, that would be cannabis, not anibus. But
So let me ask you. I know we're at the end. I would
yeah,
I would encourage your audience to drop me a note, Sid at anabasesacademy.org, or go to anabasesacademy.org, and there's they can apply, get on the wait list as quickly as possible because the 1,000
yeah,
is filling up, so that they can be, and if they're not interested in being committed, I hope they'll be intrigued enough to say, hey, let me see what the hell you're all about.
yeah. Certainly, it's on my agenda, on my to-do list to do today. So I will be connecting and following. So, Sid, fantastic conversation. The
Pleasure to be
philosophy
here.
of you has definitely shone through. I appreciate that. The professor of you has definitely shone through. Incredibly provoking conversation, dare I say it. But I've enjoyed it immensely, and I'm sure our listeners will. So thank you so much for being
Happy to
our
be here
guest.
with you. I hope I have touched at least one person in your audience to believe that they are an entrepreneur, and to march and become and evolve always, essentially.
Thank you.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.